Veon. The Women's International Media Group, something she is a part of and supports. She has covered well over 100 global meetings over a 15-year period. She has attended those meetings that have included issues regarding economics, the United Nations mega conferences, world trade, issues about world economic forums, the Bank for International Settlements, and much more. She has interviewed many world leaders, economists, and politicians. But at the bottom of the page, literally, she says she is a seeker of truth. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to get a boatload of truth right now. Please welcome warmly and generously Joan Veon. Thank you. Oh, yeah, got to get rid of that. Thank you.
No. I thought I needed that one too.
You need this still?
I don't know. Do I need both?
Nope, you're good.
Do I need both speakers back there? No? I'm good to go. Now, I want to thank each and every one of you for praying for me while I was ill. Actually, I meant to come up here and say the reports of my timely demise are wrong. So, thank you for coming. Thank you for being here today. You've heard a lot, and you're going to hear more. So, with that, let's talk about the world. But before we talk about the world, I've done a number of videos, interestingly enough, even though I was recovering from terminal cancer. I ended up doing 4 videos this past year. How's that for laying around? And you're going to see a little snippet of most of the videos today. The first video I did a year ago is called 21st Century Feudalism. It talks about the global players, you know, the Carnegie, Cecil Rhodes, the British royal family, the Rothschilds, Prince Charles. Very interesting when we start taking a look at who runs the world. Then, the 2008 credit crises. This video covers the beginning of the credit crises until October of 2008. It was followed by my latest video on the banking system, when central banks rule the world. I was just in Basel, Switzerland, covering the most recent Bank for International Settlements meeting. And I made it my business to ask them the $64 trillion question, and that is, have we entered a time in history in which it is not the presidents or prime ministers who rule and run the world, but it is the central banks? Then it was followed up by this video, The Coming Clash, Sustainable Development and Health Freedoms. As a result of dealing with cancer, I have a whole new understanding of their desire to eliminate the population. My book, Prince Charles, the Sustainable Prince, was the first book I wrote. And in it, I talked about sustainable development and public-private partnership. Interestingly, today, this book is still right on the money. Do you want to know the background? Do you want to know the history? Do you want to know how it has evolved into use today? Read this book. Today we're going to talk about a convergence of evil. I know you came here for happy times, but when I take a look at the headlines, I have to get my special effects in. When I take a look at the headlines, we see things like this, and they're all done chronologically. Stocks plummet as lending freezes up. Lawmakers left on the sides as Fed Treasury takes swift action. And I want to read you this because this is the beginning of a complete change of power and structure occurring today. This was back in September. Lawmakers on both sides expressed concern yesterday that they've had no control over when and how federal money has been used to curb the panic on Wall Street. Congressional leaders learned of the AIG rescue late Tuesday evening during a hastily called meeting in the Capitol with Bernanke and Treasury Secretary Paulson, who explained the deal after it was done. Doesn't Congress understand that over the years, as they've legislated away their power, that they're powerless? Paulson and Bernanke have taken the lead, not only from lawmakers, but from President Bush. Bush has left direct management of the crises to them and other advisors. Then we had bank bailout plan revamped. That was under Obama. But the truth of the matter is it's the very same as Bush. So what should that tell you? There is no difference between Republican and Democrat. Trillions aimed at the recovery. That's right. If you print enough money, you can solve anything. But then you have to pay the consequences. And Obama, a $1.2 trillion deficit in 2010 to save the economy. Amazing. This is a conference to be held next week, in fact, or a week and a half, on health. It's the International Swine Flu Conference. And guess what? It's a public-private partnership. Then we have China. China wants to get rid of us, or wants to get rid of the dollar anyway. We have health care. Obama came in with all kinds of things. The $634 billion health care plan. You know all about that. It's called euthanasia for everyone. Then we had the Obama blueprint as it deepens as the federal role, let me read that again. Obama blueprint deepens federal role in the markets. Well, we're going to look at that. This was from June 25th. The House passes the sweeping global warming bill. The environment. Now we have the states. U.S. state fiscal stress takes toll on municipal bonds. There's Schwarzenegger. All right? We're going to see what the end result could be of this. California IOUs set for trade. These evil people know how to make money out of nothing. Look at that. They're going to sell IOUs from a bankrupt state. And then there's the food safety bill, which will eliminate the small producers and the small farmers. Duh. So, we're going to look at the fact that there is a kapow. The environmental with Agenda 21, the economics, healthcare, and the governmental with public-private partnership. This kapow really basically is convergence. That was a little fast, but you get the idea. So, let's start with some basics. How to seize control of the world. First, those with the same goals come together. Take control of the banking system and the monetary system. Marry those who wish to participate. That's deeper than public-private partnership. You're going to marry them. Cause a global financial problem to finalize economic control. Tear down the barriers between the countries, which leads to world government. Cause the economic meltdown to consolidate world government. Adopt a new philosophy with which to rule the world and steal its assets. And change the power and structure of government. Eliminate the states and change the governmental structure to public-private partnership. So let's take a look at number one. And who do we start with? We start with the firm, otherwise known as the British royal family. All right? Their heredity goes back to about the 800s. Their goal, to rule the world. Even there, a clipping of the film, The Queen, says the Queen rules. Does anybody not get that? So how does she rule? Well, there was a man, Cecil Rhodes. This is a book written about him. They called him the founder. He lived between 1853 and 1902. Cecil Rhodes felt that there were too few Britons, as too little of the globe was British history. How thoughtful. He said, if we had retained America, there would be millions more of English living. We are the finest race in the world, and the more of the world we inhabit, the better it is for the human race. Wars would end. How wonderful. Carroll Quigley wrote of Cecil Rhodes that they caused the Boer War. It set up and controls the Rhodes Trust. It publicized the idea of and the name of the British Commonwealth of Nations in 1908 to 1918. If you purchase the video 21st Century Feudalism, you'll understand that the British Commonwealth countries today outvote the United States at the United Nations. They have a potential of 54 votes to our 1 vote. And that kind of power is passed on to all the other international organizations. We have 1 vote, and the British Commonwealth outvotes us worldwide. The secret society dominated the British delegation to the peace conference. It had a great idea to do with, let's look at this, the formation and management of the League of Nations and the system of mandates. I mean, this was absolutely diabolically brilliant. How do you bring the world under total control? You create an international level of government. We'll be looking at that. And it founded the Royal Institute for International Affairs in 1919. Rhodes elaborated, the United States was to be recovered and made an integral part of the empire. A system of colonial representation, the Commonwealth, was to be inaugurated, which would wield together the disjointed members of the empire and create a power so great that wars would be rendered impossible. Well, we're going to see some of the things that they did. Oh yeah, it's all about money, baby. It is all about money, and I didn't know how to stop it, so you're going to get a whole bunch of these. Cecil Rhodes he was dead. He died in 1902. In 1902 in Britain and 1903 in the U.S., a secret society, this is far more secret than the Bilderbergers, was set up called the Pilgrim Society, comprised of world industrialists who had the same goal and vision of Cecil Rhodes, even Americans, to bring the world under British rule. The Rhodes Scholarship Program in 1904, the U.S. had their first Rhodes Scholar attend Oxford, then Chatham House, as I mentioned, in 1919, and the Council on Foreign Relations in 1921. All ways to bring the world back under British rule. This is a picture of Chatham House that I took. This is literally the think tank where they have devised a way to bring the world under British rule. I covered a meeting there about 2 years ago. This is one of their covers. You can see they have the best of everyone. The Queen is the major patron. I know you can't imagine that. So let's talk about Cecil Rhodes for a moment so we get the real view of who he was. They call him the founder, but the truth of the matter is he was an evil, ruthless man who betrayed and plundered to get control of diamonds and gold in South Africa, including North and South Rhodesia and South Africa. He was called the premier. He took premiership of his conquests. He was called the lawgiver. It was British imperialism. He's called the world statesman, but the truth of the matter is he was confident to Queen Victoria and Kaiser Wilhelm, Lord Salisbury, Lord Rosebery, and Nathan Rothschild. He was given a permanent peerage. He was a butcher. He waged war on Christian Boers to control the diamonds in their land. The word concentration camp comes from the Boer War and the atrocities that the British did to the Boer women and children. He was financed by the British and the French Rothschilds, all right? Extremely important to remember. He was a warrior. Oh yeah, he created wars to suit his goals. He was a visionary, if you want to call that. Unite all the English-speaking people of the world. Now, what happened after Cecil Rhodes? Just take a look at all the pink in Southern Africa, and you'll see that he was very busy, and so were the British. There was another family besides Cecil Rhodes called the Rothschilds. And this is a book, and I show it because it aptly says it. The Rothschilds, the financial rulers of nations. Papa was born in 1744 and died in 1812. And he had 5 sons. He stayed in, one stayed in Frankfurt, another went to Paris. Solomon went to Vienna, Carl went to Naples, and Nathan went to London. And there, Nathan became financier to Cecil Rhodes, to the Boer War. He was knighted by Queen Victoria. He financed Britain in the Napoleonic Wars. He was the major financier of all kinds of infrastructure in Europe and worldwide. Today, his agents who work on his behalf in the United States include J.P. Morgan, George Soros, Peter Mandelson, and, believe it or not, Vernon Jordan. So, what was the goal of the Rothschilds? To become like royalty, adopt a shield, a new name, and knighthoods from all over Europe. They have it. Nathan Rothschild said, "I care not what puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire on which the sun never sets. The man who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply." Now, if you think it's only Britain that he controls the money supply of, Professor Esser, who wrote a book in the 1800s about this, said of the Rothschilds, Russia, Turkey, Egypt, India, China, Japan, and South America are probably owned as far as any nation can be owned in London or Paris. The world itself, in fact, pays them tribute. It actually rises in the morning to earn its living by utilizing their capital and occupies its days in making the money to pay them interest, which is to make them still wealthier. In short, you want to know what the current credit crisis is all about? It's a transfer of wealth, and it is to take the assets from people who will not be able to maintain their mortgage and grab all the equity out of their house and transfer it to them. It's about more than that, but for the time being. And in fact, this was a first. You hardly see, hear, or read the name of Rothschild anywhere. I subscribe to the Financial Times. I've done it for about 10 years. Very rarely do you see the name Rothschild mentioned, and they are a very large global banking institution on the forefront of public-private partnership and many other things. Here, Sir Evelyn, that's how they pronounce it, Evelyn de Rothschild, had a special interview on CNBC talking about global banking regulation. Nathaniel Rothschild is his son. This guy has more money and is more brilliant than all of the other previous in his family. And he happens to be on the board of directors for the JFK School of Government, and he's a director of the World Economic Forum, to say the least. So, what is the best way to rule the world? You marry money and power. Prince William, his grandmother, Diana's mother, reportedly is a Rothschild. He may be the first Rothschild to sit on the British throne. Now, so let's talk about how we established the dynasty, we established the power, we established the infrastructure. Now, how are we going to seize control? This was diabolically brilliant. It's called a central bank. I know many of you know about it. The concept of a central bank came from Sweden, which was the first to form a private corporation to lend money to the government with no fixed time period for repayment. In other words, interest is forever. The Bank of England was birthed when William Patterson proposed raising 1.2 million British pounds to lend to the government. And you know what? King William II was the first to invest. He was the largest investor in the Bank of England. So if you think that the Bank of England is the only central bank that the British royal family is a shareholder to, you are a little naive. There are the central banks of the world, and you can see that It took up until 1913 for America to get her third central bank. And so it was set up, the Federal Reserve. Many of you know all the evil things that surrounded setting up the Federal Reserve. There it is, Washington, D.C. I basically tell people, when you come to the United States, or when you come to Washington, D.C., you shouldn't go to Congress to show them the power of government. You should take them to Constitution Avenue and show them the Federal Reserve. This is it. So, Federal Reserve Act has been amended 195 times. It gives powers to separate pools of currency, to intervene in currency markets. This is called covering your rear end when you don't have enough dollars. In 1999, it broadened the range of discount loans and collateral. Up until then, the Federal Reserve never took mortgages as collateral. Now, they just may be your mortgage banker. And they've been given many other powers. And we're going to see how they're being embellished at this moment. So how does the seize control of the world? Cause a global financial problem to take financial control. This is, I want to see, how many of you know about the blueprint for a modernized regulatory system? Nobody. Okay. This was authored by Hank Paulson. It was published March 31st, 2008. And when I read it, I was in a cancer institute at that time. I couldn't read it. 3 months later, when I read it, I was absolutely amazed. First, it transfers control of remaining financial assets that the Federal Reserve currently does not have to the Federal Reserve. It sets in place a new regulatory structure that will complement a global regulatory structure. So let's take a look at how to transfer. Now, I want you to pay attention to this. On the right-hand side, you have what the U.S. government has control over, or Wall Street. I'll mention it as we go. And on the right-hand side, you have the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve at this moment only controls the entire commercial banking system that is under the commercial banking code, which they're trying to change, and I'll show you why. This is what's in the blueprint for a modernized regulatory system. First of all, they want to take the credit unions and transfer them under control of the Federal Reserve. And that would be credit unions, state-chartered banks, and savings and loans. Then they want to take the insurance industry, which is currently under state rule, and transfer it under Federal Reserve to the Federal Reserve. Then they want to take the mortgage industry. Nobody oversees the mortgage industry, and they want to transfer all the mortgages to Federal Reserve control. Then the payment and settlement system of Wall Street. They've basically gone on record to say that they need to control the payment and settlement system of the world, or Wall Street, which will then lead to the world. And lastly, they want the Federal Reserve to become market stability regulator, and one of the headlines mentioned that. I mean, what do we see here? We see, basically, there have been no invasion. There are no black helicopters. Nobody's fired any bullets. It's all being done this way. This is total final control. They are basically gutting and stripping America of our assets. Second, set in place a global regulatory structure that will complement a global regulatory structure. In 1930, the Bank for International Settlements was set up in Switzerland. And I have other videos that go into the history of the Bank for International Settlements. Every country, with the exception of a few Muslim countries, have a central bank. The Bank for International Settlements is where they meet. It is the center of their brains, and they determine what's going to happen in the world financially and economically. So let's see what's happening on the international level with the growing central bank infrastructure. First, as I mentioned, the Bank for International Settlements was set up in 1930. Then we have an organization called IASCO, set up first in 1973 and then redone in 1984, where all the stock exchange commissioners of the world meet. Then in 1998, they set up an international organization of insurance supervisors, where all the insurance supervisors of the world meet. Then in 1999, they set up something called the Financial Stability Forum, which would be comprised only of the group of 7 regulatory agencies. That would be FDIC, SEC, FINRA, the rest of them. And then in 2002, they set up the International Association of Insurance Depositors. These are the FDICs of the world. Do you see a powerful global structure run by just a few people who really comprise a global mafia on the international level? This is it. This is it. So what they've recently done is they change the name, the power, and the structure, and we don't have time to go into it, of the Financial Stability Forum to the Financial Stability Board. And now it went from the G7 to the group of 20 regulators. Now, what are they doing here in the States? They are proposing a modernized regulatory system. Whenever you hear any congressional testimony, they are constantly talking about how we need a modernized regulatory system. Now, they are proposing in this modernized regulatory system that all of the different regulators here in the U.S. be put under one umbrella. And then you see how it will lift up to the Financial Stability Board. Now, next you want to tear down the barriers between the countries. This was done. Here are the different barriers, not all of them, but many of them, between the countries of the world. And little by little, these barriers came down. First, the economic barriers in 1944, then the political barriers with the establishment of the United Nations. Many of you know about the United Nations and all the attributes of it. The fact that it has its own monetary system called the special drawing right. Then the World Health Organization was set up. This is Rothschild owned and run. The World Health Organization, headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland, is an international group of 191 member states devoted to the maintenance and improvement of health. Can you imagine? The maintenance and health of all people throughout the whole world. How magnanimous. Its preamble to the Constitution defines health as a, quote, complete state of physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Or I'd be afraid they're going to mess with my head. Many have asked, who are they? They have a world parliament. They meet just like the UN, except instead of political leaders, it's health officials. Much has been written about, as I mentioned, the Rothschild control with big pharma of who. So when we talk about vaccines like some have done, can we understand? Do we have a picture here? In 1994, the trade barriers between the countries of the world fell. Then in 2001, the military and the intelligence barriers. And here we are with the regulatory barriers. This is the last barrier that will separate us from total control. So, how does it look? It looks like this. All right? We have all the barriers of the countries of the world falling above the nation states. And then, and this is called globalization, now we have the global regulatory barriers falling. And if you're going to have regulatory barriers fall, you need a global accounting system, global taxation, a global custody system, global settlements. You need a global customs agreement. You need a global commodity exchange, and that's also what is being set up at this point, and many other things. So you're seeing this vast infrastructure being set up. Now you need a philosophy. It started in 1961, report from Iron Mountain. Basically, they said, if we're going to go into peace, you need a new enemy. Because after all, they too were concerned about how to reduce the population, because that's done through the military. And so, report from Iron Mountain said that the new enemy would be the environment. Then that was supported by Silent Spring by Rachel Carson in 1962, Small is Beautiful by Schumacher in 1973, the Gaia Atlas of Planet Management in 1984, Save the Earth with Jonathan Porritt, who's a very good friend of Prince Charles, and he even wrote the foreword to it, along with Robert Redford and many others, in 1991, Healing Gaia by James Lovelock. What James Lovelock did was basically he put forth what is really a pagan agenda. Gaia, the worship of Mother Earth. Earth is a living organism, and as such, he put forth a couple of different philosophies that have been adopted that we're going to talk about in a minute. Small is Beautiful, author Schumacher wrote a guide for the perplexed in 1997. That should be 1997. Doesn't make any difference. So we have the evolution of environmentalism. The first population reduction conference was held in 1927. Margaret Sanger with the League of Nations. Now, who started the League of Nations? The British. Okay. 1948, you had the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, IUCN. It's a huge umbrella organization for 75 nations. In 1961, the World Wildlife Federation was set up by Prince Bernard of Holland and Prince Philip of England. Are we seeing a pattern here? The British have their fingerprints, footprints all over. 1972 was the first United Nations environmental meeting in Switzerland. That same year, the Club of Rome issued limits to growth that basically said the Earth didn't have enough to support you and me. 1949, the Nature Conservancy in the US and the UK was set up. In 1950, the Sierra Club, which was started in the 1890s, became prominent. 61, the World Wildlife Federation, Friends of the Earth. 1973, Roe v. Wade takes effect. 1971, Greenpeace. Are you seeing a profile here? 1974, the World Watch Institute. 1980 was the first report from the World Conservation Strategy. We're going to look at that in a minute. 1982 was the World Resources Institute. 1983, the United Nations forms the Brundtland Commission. We're going to look at that too. 1987 was the Fourth Wilderness Conference with David Rockefeller and Baron Edmund de Rothschild that basically said they would take you and me as collateral for the debt of the world. 1992 was the Rio Earth Summit. Agenda 21, the Global Biodiversity Assessment. So let's take a look at this little evolution of environmentalism. The United Nations Environment Program was set up in 1972. It partnered with the World Wildlife Fund, which, don't forget, was set up by Prince Philip and Bernard. They worked with IUCN, a major environmental organization, in 1974 on a project. And that project was called the World Conservation Strategy. It was also endorsed by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN and UNESCO. It was also endorsed in 1980 when it was finished by the United Nations. And in 1983, it was the impetus for forming the Brundtland Commission, which brought sustainable development into our lives. Now, again, this is all part and parcel of the Rhodes Trust and vision. Who was Gro Harlem Brundtland? She was Prime Minister at the time of Norway. She's now a former. In 1983, she chaired the World Commission for the Environment and Development, called the Brundtland Commission, BC. and Sustainable Development, BC. You know, I should know what BC is. I can't get it. In Rio, 1992. And she was the director of the World Health Organization. She left after she was chairman of the Brundtland Commission. She went to become a director of the World Health. Do you see anything here? So what did her report say? It was a global agenda for change, to propose long-term environmental strategies for achieving sustainable development by 2000 and beyond, to recommend ways concern for the environment may be translated into greater cooperation among developing countries and between countries at different stages in development. They wrote, the challenge of finding sustainable development paths ought to provide the impetus imperative for a renewed search for multilateral solutions, that means for all the countries to become one, and a reconstructed international economic system of cooperation. They define sustainable development to make development sustainable to ensure that it meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations on environmental resources and by the ability of the biospheres to absorb the impact of human activities. Did you know you and I are responsible for the sad, awful condition of the planet environmentally? They haven't read Genesis 1, have they? Then we had mega conferences. In 1972 was the first environmental summit and the EPAs. The Environmental Protection Agency was set up worldwide, including the U.S., as you know. 1974 was a population conference, how to reduce the population. 1976 had to do with habitats, what happens in the city. 1992 was the Rio Earth Summit. 1994 was the Population Reduction Conference. That was my first UN meeting. 1996 was another habitat meeting where public-private partnership was unveiled. We had a World Food Summit, and then we had the 10-year follow-up to Rio in 2002. This is it, Agenda 21. Reference was made in Agenda 21 to this document, the Global Biodiversity Assessment. What did Agenda 21 do? Well, we have the pre-1992 view of the world. We have man with, who had, according to Genesis 1, control over the earth, dominance over the earth. The pagan view set up by the 1992 Rio Earth Summit is that the earth has dominance over man. Okay? Agenda 21 says the world can't feed and sustain 8.5 billion. People are destroying the earth. Animals have more value than people. They need to roam freely. There is a transfer of wealth between the haves and the have-nots, and there's a reordering of property rights and individual rights, along with the elimination of representative government. So this is what it is: sustainable development, biodiversity and smart growth, sustainable development and biodiversity, socialism, biodiversity, and public-private partnership and regional government. This book I bought at the Virginia Military Institute. I almost fainted. This is a textbook at VMI on earth sciences, which basically is Agenda 21. Here is a recent magazine that I bought on population and sustainability. This is one of the pages from the G8 summit that was recently held in Italy. Look what it's called: Responsible Leadership for a Sustainable Future. 500 pages of Agenda 21, the Global Biodiversity Assessment, and Public-Private Partnership. Now, 7, get rid of the original structure of government set in place by our founders. Eliminate the states and change the structure to public-private partnership. So let's talk first about eliminating the states. This is, you can see this mantra starting about 1992. Don't forget that was the year of the Rio Earth Summit. Business Week, Reinventing Government. Reinventing Government, this is a book that was made very popular the same year. How to do it. This man, Prince Charles, he is a master. He started, he has pushed, He has promoted, he is the one responsible for the global use of public-private partnership. This was a book that I found at the World Bank in 1996. This is what changed my life and my understanding of the world. Published by the Prince of Wales International Business Leaders Forum with the World Bank and the United Nations Development Program, all about public-private partnership. In 1998, another book on managing partnerships. And then in 1999, there was this conference. I went to it at the State Department, sponsored by Al Gore, called Reinventing Government. I'm like, oh my goodness. He called us customers instead of citizens. It laid the foundation for public-private partnership in the U.S., and I went to the 7th Global Meeting on Reinventing Government in Vienna a couple years ago. The United Nations now has charge of reinventing government, and the answer, government is broke, public-private partnership. Here is a book from the 5th Global Forum for Reinventing Government, which is now sponsored by the UN, and towards participatory and transparent government. This is from that 7th meeting in 2007. So, what is public-private partnership? You've heard the term. At one point, you had government separate from business. And that was the world of John Maynard Keynes. So, Keynes said, basically, the way that you jumpstart government, if you go back to 1933, is to go into debt. So at some point, you have all the cities, all the counties, all the governments, government is broke. And business has the money. How do you like that? Then came von Hayek, an economist, and he said, we need smaller government, so the way you do that is for government to sell their assets. Reagan said, oh, I agree. Let's get government off our backs. Now, did any of you translate Reagan's statement, let's get government off our backs, as a reason to change government and the structure through public-private partnership? Of course not. Great plan. So, 1933, we have governments that are broke. We have von Hayek saying, sell your assets. Prince Charles, look what we're going to do. Business is going to come and help and bail out government. Prince Charles, I've interviewed the woman, Jane Nelson, who's written all of his how-to books on public-private partnership. This is what it is. You have three entities. You have government, business, and non-governmental organizations. So let's take a look at how it looks. First, you have the public level. Public refers to all levels of government: local, county, state, federal, foreign, and United Nations. Private refers to corporations, foundations, nonprofits, NGOs, and churches. So these are the two partners. What has happened, and you see it with everything that is going on today, all the partnerships that our government, is bailing out, GM and whoever else they're bailing out, you and I, the taxpayer, we're getting the debt. Corporations are getting the profit. The corporations and the banks are getting the profit. They are still looking to set up a public-private partnership to take all the toxic assets. So stay tuned for that one. This is an internet email that I received. It's about a conference that's going to take place shortly. It's infrastructure development through public-private partnership. It's on public-private partnership in roads, ports, airports, surface transportation, railroad, etc. See, what happens when they do a public-private partnership of the airport or transportation or roads, the assets that local, county, and state government owned get moved from government to the new public-private partnership. So, we originally paid for these assets with our tax dollars. Now they're going to be moved off our books into this new partnership. And who has the money? If all levels of government are broke, it's the corporation. Prince Charles knew what he was doing. Somebody sent me this, the International Swine Flu Conference. I hope to go to it. This is a public-private partnership. It's all about setting up this whole system through public-private partnership. Now, let's talk about the change in governmental structure. Regionalism. The international level of government would be regionalism, regional government, and metropolitan government. How do we translate that to us? When you look at America right now, we have the global level, the federal level, and the state level. And so it's very true that the global level gets to you and me because the federal level is not doing what they need to do. In metropolitan government or regional government, your local county and state will merge, and township, will merge with the state and move up to the federal level. Watch. This is where they're going. A complete collapse of the local levels of government and merging it with state. Why do you think state is broke? They had a reason for that. It's called devolution of government. This is happening worldwide. Oh yeah, there's no representative government with this. Richard Nixon issued Executive Order 11647 in 71. He said, now would you know what I just explained by what he said? Let us give the people of America a chance, a bigger voice in deciding for themselves those questions that so greatly affect their lives. And you see, through that executive order, he divided America up into 10 regions. And we are in Region 3 right now, with it being in West Virginia. So I know you're all warm and fuzzy about that. Congressman Rourke said this of Richard Nixon's executive order. Power to the people is a slogan used not only by radical socialists in their plans to communize America, but also by President Nixon in his new American Revolution. Joe Hinman, who was a fabulous researcher, said this about what Nixon did. This is the first time in the history of American nation that the regional boundaries of the major United Nations chartered domestic programs have been made coterminous under the administrative governance of the chief executive of the United States. Regionalism, the merging of the cities, counties, and even states into vast tax grids, lays the foundation for the devious metro format to outsmart the taxpayers. The regional ruling bodies do not represent the citizen taxpayer. The Habitat 2 Agenda in 1996 said this: rural and urban development are interdependent. We adopt the principles of partnership. We must, with legal framework of each country, promote decentralization, that's what they call it, through democratic local authorities, drawing upon the experience of the worldwide cooperation by the World Assembly of Cities and Local Authorities, ICELI. In 1998, Clinton issued this executive order, 13083. It redefines states so that it includes all levels. Look at how they're changing the terminology. Defines the difference between the Constitution and federalism, changes the sovereign powers granted to states so federal agencies have control over states. It allows the presidents to declare international emergency, which gives FEMA the power over the direct participation of the cities. This happens to be from Tulsa, Oklahoma, their Vision 2002 for regional government. I'm not able to move my PowerPoint. There we go. This is from, I think it's from an internet. Here for Alabama, it shows you the public-private partnership, the business partners, all the different companies, how Alabama will be changed, the regional map, and the things that will change. And so we have to ask ourselves, how will this transfer from state government to regional government take place? Well, here we are, back with that article from Schwarzenegger. U.S. state fiscal stress takes toll on municipal bonds. The truth of the matter is, I see California as probably going to be the test state to collapse government and go to regional government. I see that happening. What is Obama? Obama may be many things. He doesn't have the power somebody thinks he has. I don't think he has power. He gets it from his handlers. But he is the convergence president. So, having said that, we look at these things, we see how our world is changing. How do we fight evil? We fight evil with the authority that Jesus gave us. And I do not think that we are doing this. All right. There is a book that I'm selling by Charles Capps, Our Spiritual Authority. Let's just review this. First, we need to know Jesus took on the form of man in order to take back the authority in the world that was given to Satan in the Garden of Eden. When we take a look at John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. John 1:14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. You know who that was. That was Jesus. He became flesh and dwelt among us. Jesus gave his authority to his disciples. Behold, I give unto you power to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing by any means shall hurt you. You see, we're allowing them, we're sort of like Sylvester Stallone in Rambo. No, that's the wrong movie. Okay, in whatever movie that is where he's the boxer. Rocky, thank you. All right? And his technique was to let the other guy punch him to a pulp, and then he came back. All right? We are allowing these evil people to punch us, make pulp out of us. It is about time we took back you see, it's not a physical battle, it's a spiritual battle. It's about time we took back our territory. Ephesians 6:10 through 17. Let's look at this. Be strong in the Lord and the power of his might. And I know you know this. Take on the whole armor to stand against the wiles of Satan. What have I been talking about? The wiles of Satan. We wrestle not against powers and principalities, but against wickedness in high places. Talking about that. We are to take on the helmet of salvation, which is the Word of God. Unless you have the Word of God memorized inside of you, you do not have that sword to fight. Okay? I learned that. I've been memorizing Scripture like crazy. So here we have a map of the world. All right? Let's just take a look. The earth, Bible says, the earth is the Lord's. The earth is, I didn't put that there. Okay. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, and all they that dwell therein. That's who really owns the earth. We've just seen how they want to take it. We have the ability, we have the power, we have the authority in Jesus Christ to do this. In the name of Jesus the Christ, I cancel the goals and plans of the enemy to rape, rob, kill, destroy what God has created and intended for good. There's another book over there called Blessing Your Spirit. I would like to close with this prayer. Next slide, please. Thank you. Blessing for you. Keep moving. I bless you. I bless you. The Father made you. He master planned you, and you are uniquely designed for this particular time in history. He chose the time in history and the family He placed you into and all your days up to now. I bless you with knowing the joy of the Lord that gives you strength to press on, to go forward, to endure hardship as a good soldier of Jesus Christ, to accomplish and to fulfill what He has for you in this day and hour. I bless you in the name of Jesus. Amen.